The 25th Hour Radio Show.
I want to thank everyone for tuning in to the 25th Hour Radio Show today. I am your host, Rob Fairless, and on the phone with me today is the string wizard himself, John McEuen. John, thanks for taking a few minutes out of your day to join me on the show.
Well, thank you. That's a funny title to have. That's what reviewers have said about things that I play, so I'll let them say it.
So let's get right into it, man. I always start the show off basically the same way, and that's to get a little background information about my guest. So what's your story? What turned you on to music? What made you interested enough to learn to play yourself?
I was a nerd in high school, a dork, you know, not by desire. It just seemed to happen that way. So I started doing magic tricks, and I got into magic, and I got a job in the Disneyland magic shop as a teenager. The reason I started playing is right around my 17th year, I went to see a group called the Dillards, who were also the Darwin family on the Nitty Gritty Show. And that got me hooked on bluegrass, but I didn't have a group. So in 1966, around August, the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band got underway and on a path to make our first album, which was kind of a strange thing because our first review in Billboard before we had a record deal was doubtful if they'll ever be captured on record. Now in our 50th year, and along the way of doing that, I started playing other instruments, mandolin, guitar, banjo, fiddle, lap slide guitar, and running into people on the road that I always wanted to record with, which led up to the making of this current album, Made in Brooklyn, where I gathered us all in Brooklyn 40 years later.
Now, as far as being in a band or joining a band, was the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band the first actual band you became a part of? I mean, there wasn't any hopping from one band to the next like a lot of artists in the very beginning?
No, see, everybody was so young. And we're talking about the second half of the 60s when I was 20 years old. One guy was a junior in high school, and one was a senior. One was in his first year of college, and I played in a folk group for 6 months, and I had a little bluegrass group with one of the guys that ended up in the Dirt Band with. You know, we probably only did 12 performances, but I played with Michael Martin Murphy for 6 months, the guy that's in the country music world, and that was before the Dirt Band, and I didn't want to be in a group called the Texas Twosome that had 4 people in it, and I wasn't from Texas. So, although I ended up on 5 of Michael's albums over the years, good musical relationship, there wasn't a lot of jumping around early on because we were just starting, and things went along to where the band made over 30 albums, and I've made 6 of my own. This is my 6th one, the Made in Brooklyn one.
Now, being a young adult like you were, right, with the dream of having music on the radio, playing in front of thousands of fans, what was it like for you when it actually happened? I mean, do you remember the first time you heard your music being played on the radio? How did that make you feel?
In 1967, I was driving down Sunset Boulevard at 1:10 in the morning, and we'd been together for about 9 months. We made our first album, and we had a single out called "Buy For Me the Rain," and KRLA played it. Here's a new song by a new band, Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. I almost drove off the road. I had $8, and which was a lot of money then. But I went to Ranch Park at the grocery store there on Sunset and bought a bunch of food and took it back to the house we were all living in up in Laurel Canyon area. And imagine 5 guys in a band and me living in a house all together. It was really a mess. And I brought in the food and went, "We're going to be rich." And yes, it was very exciting. Unfortunately, the B-side of that record was a song called Candyman. By the time it made it to the top 30, some radio station said, "Oh, the B-side of this record is a drug song," and they dropped it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but it made it to the top 10 in some places, and it got us underway. In 1968, we ended up in the movie Paint Your Wagon for 4 months, watching Lee Marvin and Clint Eastwood learning how to sing. Some very strange things have happened with Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. In 1977, we were the first American group to go to Russia. We played 28 sold-out shows. Then, in the 1980s. You know, we had a few hits early on in the 70s, and a successful album, and the album Will the Circle Be Unbroken kind of took the acoustic world by storm. And currently, Will the Circle Be Unbroken is somewhere in the top 20 on the Amazon bestsellers of bluegrass music, still 40 years later. But by the 80s, we ended up having 18 country hits. And in the 90s, there was a few more, and it just kind of kept going. And along the way, I've always crossed paths with people and sat in with them or recorded with them, and been very fortunate about all the great players I've been able to work with.
Now, as far as hearing your music on the radio, you've worked with so many different artists besides the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. I mean, it would almost literally take up the whole show if I just started naming them off. What makes you an artist that these people find so enjoyable to work with?
Well, when Marshall Tucker was recording their Long Hard Ride album, we played some shows with Marshall Tucker in the 70s. And I got a call from the guitar player, Troy Caldwell, to play on their album. So I didn't question it. I was just glad. And Leon Russell called me one time to see if I'd come to L.A. and play on an album by a guy named Bill Wyman. I had to ask the other guys in the group, who's Bill Wyman? And they said, well, he plays bass in the Stones. Why? And I went, oh, okay. And I said to Leon, I'll be there in a couple of days. Thanks for calling. And I've known Leon since '66 when he was watching us rehearse at a folk club. And why? I guess because I'm fortunate. And people like what I do.
And speaking of collaborating, I think this would be a perfect moment to segue into your latest project, your latest album, Made in Brooklyn, where you have collaborated with the list of who's who in the music world. First of all, what put in your mind to even start working on this album?
Well, a couple years ago, I wanted to record in a different way that would get a more natural. It's really hard for people to understand what it's like to be in the middle of a group when you're playing the music. And I happened to coincidentally run into Norman Chesky, who owns the label Chesky Records, and they record with one binaural microphone that everybody gathers around. And when you play it back, it sounds like you're there. And that's different than most albums. You have a bunch of people in the studio and maybe 10 microphones, and people record a basic track, and then the next day they put vocals down, and the next day they might add a new bass or a keyboard, and then some background vocals another day. And it's kind of like having conversations with a bunch of different people in different rooms, and sometimes on different days. It's not the same as if you're in the room together, talking all at once or with each other, feeding off of each other. So wanting to put people together and do it the way they did a long time ago, starting back with the Bristol Sessions. For those that don't know, that is a reference to when Ralph Peer went to Bristol, Tennessee in 1927, and with one microphone recorded people like the Carter family and all the Appalachian players to make new forays into music that was getting out there. And, well, the Circle Be Unbroken album was done 2-track, but with a lot of microphones. And the idea of recording the way the Chesky people do was very appealing. And so over the next couple of years, lining up the people, and there were many songs I wanted to do that were different, that it just worked out. That it was fully available on the days necessary last April, and we convened in the studio and knocked out 15 songs in 2 days. And it wasn't a rush job at all or anything. And everybody, we rehearsed, we were ready for it. And some people say, how can you do so many songs in 2 days? Well, it was actually more like 50 years in 2 days. A lot of everybody on the record had experience in the business for 40 years. I mean, Jay Unger is a fine fiddle player. You've heard him on a lot of, if you listen to folk music, or if you listen to Ken Burns' Civil War documentary. Jay's the guy that wrote and played A Shilkin Farewell. That was the theme of that. David Amram's 86. He's played with everybody since Dizzy Gillespie in the 50s. And John Cowan, the bluegrass world, became my favorite singer when I first heard him in 1974. And I had a song that I wanted him to sing. and I've wanted him to sing it for 20 years. And Andy Gessling's from a group called Railroad Earth, and we started playing together about 4 years ago. And I told him then, I said, I'm going to get a project that we're going to play together on. Martha Redbone, I made an album with several years ago that she was just really a great first take singer. And all these people, I called Steve Martin to play on a Warren Zevon song. And since we started playing together, and my brother managed him and produced his movies and music in the 70s, and Steve's been a lifelong friend. Well, he came and did clawhammer banjo for me while I played the mandolin. Everybody had to play all at the same time, and that meant everybody had to be on the top of their game. Because we couldn't go in and fix things. You couldn't go, oh, let me go do my solo over. Nope. You're going to have to do it right the first time.
Now, I know in this day and age, it's almost impossible to get people all together like that to record an album. Even a regular band, right? But that's like the way all the greatest albums were put together back in the day, right?
I think so, and that was the target. I mean, we started off, well, how about January 18th? Oh, no, okay. A few days later, that won't work. And then, okay, we're settled on February 3rd and 4th. No. By 1st of January, somebody couldn't do it. The end of February, no. Middle of March, no. Finally, April 5 and 6, everybody could lock in the date and not have other conflicts with their other careers, what they do. And that was a happy time when we're set to go. And there was an excitement level about that with everybody. It was really fun.
Now, do you think we'll ever get back to that, like you recorded this album, or do you think these days they're long gone?
Well, I don't know. I think one thing I'm trying to get across with Made in Brooklyn is that albums like this can be made, and they're interesting. They're different. They make you feel like you're part of it. It's, some of my favorite records were done in one take. There used to be an old saying in the music business, how long does it take to record a hit song? I don't know. How long? Well, it should take about 3 minutes. Not 3 months, because you are going to end up with 3 or 4 minutes of a cool song. And the other thing I like about this album is I didn't have those worries about, radio's never going to play this. It's 4.5 minutes long. Well, that's how long some of the songs are. 4.5, and in fact, one is 6.5, but that's what they needed to be that day. There's a couple of shorter ones, but there wasn't the constraints of this won't work. It's more like, let's do what this song is telling us to do and see how the music pours out, Mm-hmm. And it did.
One thing we do have nowadays that they didn't have back then that could possibly be a little better, that's objective there, is having social media to promote products and get instant feedback from fans. Do you use social media as a promotional tool, as a way to interact with your audience?
It's a definite necessity now. And it's kind of like the new underground newspaper, only if you can get the word of it out there, it'll reach more people. One of the difficulties is, somebody asked me about the difference between then and now in the music business. And my analogy is, back then, in the 60s, 70s, imagine a guy standing on home plate in a little baseball diamond with about 10,000 seats. And he's playing the guitar and singing, and everybody's having hot dogs and popcorn and eating and talking. But slowly, they start listening to the guy on home plate. And they go, hey, pretty soon he's got about 1,000 or maybe 2,000 people listening, and people are quieting down. They're listening to his song, and they like the guy. And some may not like him, but at least they're listening and they're commenting. Okay, let's fast forward to now. There's a guy on home plate, and he's the audience, and in the stands are 10,000 people with guitars and stuff singing all different songs. The guy on home plate says, there's too much to listen to. I'm going home. So without social media, it's hard to get through. And with it, it can be helpful. it's not the answer. I'm still hoping for airplay, and airplay's coming in pretty good on this album. In its first week, it's number 9 on the Billboard Bluegrass chart, and number 10 on the Amazon Folk chart. So some good things are happening. But it takes people. It takes word of mouth. Here's where the social media is important for music. Let me ask you a question. Do you ever think about going to a restaurant and you look up on the internet what the review comments are like first?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially a new restaurant. And then I've never been to.
If it has 1 star, are you going to go to that one or the one with 4.5 stars?
Well, 4.5 stars, of course.
Yeah. Well, that could be very important with music. Fortunately, on Amazon, at least right now, all my 20 reviews are all 5-star. I hope it keeps going.
Yeah, that kind of ties into my next question here. I was going to ask you, I was going to say before we start to wrap things up, I want to touch real quick once more on the album. Let's pretend, all right, no one has ever heard of you or any of the people who helped you on this album. Is there a couple songs you would tell these people to check out on possibly like iTunes to get a feel what this album and John McEuen is all about, possibly start a whole new fan base with a new generation of listeners?
Well, I would say there's 2. I mean, can I qualify this if the people like banjo, it would help.
Yeah.
Not that that's the only thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. If I could say 3, I would say the first cut, Brooklyn Crossing, which is my guitar and open D tuning, and 2 other instruments, fiddle and bass and percussion, 3 others. But then there's the Warren Zevon song, Excitable Boy, which is a new, what I think is a new bluegrass murder ballad. In bluegrass music, there's about 1/3 of the music in bluegrass is about somebody dying or getting killed or in a flood or a murder ballad. and Warren Zevon wrote this totally disgusting song on that topic. I mean, who's ever heard of Mac the Knife was a murder ballad. My God, the guy killed 10 people in that song. Mm-hmm. And people like to hear the dark sides for some reason. And then I guess let's see. Acoustic Traveler is an instrumental of mine that kind of takes a person on a journey that starts off in a folky way and it ends up sounding Celtic and then kind of Irish Celtic and then goes into French gypsies kind of sound. And I've been told by some people that's your favorite instrumental. But, oh my gosh, it's hard to pick. My favorite Dream is written by Felix and Boudleaux Bryant, the songwriting team that wrote Rocky Top, All I Have to Do Is Dream, and a lot of Everly Brothers hits, songs like Love Hurts. And their son called me and said, would you like to hear a demo that my dad made that nobody's ever heard? And I went, oh my God, yes. And he sent me about 20 songs that nobody has ever heard from this songwriting team. And I got to pick this one, which is, it's like a new classic standard. I set that in about a 1948 period, so it sounds like you're listening to an old jazz band. And so that would be it. I would say my picks right now.
Now, was there anything else you got going on at the moment that I failed to mention other than the new record? Anything going on with the band itself? I mean, 2016 is like the 50th anniversary of the formation of the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, right?
The Nitty Gritty Dirt Band is on the road in our 50th year, playing music that spans the entire 50 years, which is quite a fun thing to do. We have a broad audience that's anywhere from 8 years old to 80 years old. And sometimes we have 2 or 3 generations at one concert. But that is what we are, and we're out there doing it, and it's a good thing.
Now, do you still got your radio show? Yeah, I was going to say your radio show.
I have had a radio show on XM, Sirius XM, for 8 years now, called Acoustic Traveler, and it's an hour-long show that I make that runs 6 times a month. And the other thing I'd say, if people are interested in seeing something else that I do, is syndicated, the word syndicated, and the word news, and then .net. So syndicatednews.net is an internet news website about music, politics, and everything. And my partner we've been working on this for about 6 years now, and we're up to 6 million hits a month. So it's quite exciting to see it grow. I mean, last 2 years ago, we were excited that we had 5,000 a month. And it's also abbreviated the letters SNN, like in syndicated news. S, Sam, Nancy, dot BZ, boy zebra, SNN dot BZ. That's the shortcut. And if it's a like some kind of murder mystery problem, you don't just get a couple of lines of what happened. My partner's able to get the whole court documents that are publicly accessible. For instance, when the Trayvon Martin thing was happening, we posted the whole conversation that his sister had made, not just 2 lines, the whole phone conversation. And the basic thing is, post the stuff, put it up there, and let people decide. Don't just feed them a couple of lines and say, this is one thing or this is what happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
Say, this is what happened, and what do you think of it? But there's entertainment stuff, a lot of music news, political things, and it's translated into 50 different languages when you click on on the flag of whatever country. So that's an interesting thing. We're getting worldwide traffic, which is fun to do.
Now, if anyone out there would like more information on John and what he's up to, make sure you check out his website at www.johnmceuen.com. That's JohnMceuen.com. John, thanks for taking a few minutes out of your day to join me on the show. Go ahead.
It's hard to spell my name. I have to look at my license sometimes.
Yeah, that's why I spelled that out, because I know if someone told me to spell your last name, I probably would spell it wrong.
So it's much easier just to Google John Nitty Gritty.
John,
and my website will show up right at the top of a Google search. And I appreciate the coverage. This album seems to be getting a lot of great reviews.
Yeah, I was listening to the album this morning. My wife bought me a nice set of headphones about a year ago.
Oh.
And I was listening to it, and like you said, the way it was recorded, with the microphone and everything, and I was like, I was super amazed at the sound quality and how that sounded. It was just really neat. I can't wait I'm going to listen to the whole album tonight straight through.
Well, good. I find people have told me I've listened to this thing 5 times. I usually don't listen to a new album more than twice and then write a review, but I'm listening to it more than one reviewer told me he had to buy another one because he went to his house and he took it in his house and then drove off and had to go back and get it because he wanted to drive with it.
Well, it's one of them albums. As I'm listening to it, it's actually, when people buy an album, usually back when I was younger anyway, they would have the one release, right? So you'd buy the whole album and just play that one song out forever. Then you would find another song off the album that you like, and then you'd play that. This is a little bit different, I think. It's just a really, really solid, good album that you can listen to all the way through.
If you get that point across to people, that'll be great. Thank you.
There you go, everybody. Well, John, thanks so much for taking a few minutes out of your day today.
Well, like I said to my mom, thanks for having me.
The 25th Hour Radio Show.